Hey friend, in today's watercolor tutorial, I'm going to be teaching how to paint White Sands National Park in New Mexico with these loose geometric shapes of the sand dunes. Without further ado, let's get to it. Today I'm going to be using VanDyke Brown, Payne's Gray, Yellow Ochre, Sap Green, and Prussian Blue. The paper I've taped down here is a size 5 by 7 inches, and I'm using a size 6, 2, and size 12 Princeton round brush. To get started, I'm just going to do a wash of water for the first couple of inches here of the painting for our sky. And for our sky, I'm just going to use a touch of Prussian Blue. I just want a nice kind of simple wash here. And I'm just going to use a left to right motion back and forth all the way down those first couple of inches. And then to help kind of mute down the color just a little bit, so that way when we overlap our paint for our mountains in the background here, I don't want this kind of harsh blue waterline. So all I'm gonna do is just take some plain clean water on my size 12 brush and just kind of buff out that transition with just some clean water, so that way there's just a very subtle kind of fade and ombre effect of color. I'll go ahead and let this wash dry, and then we'll be back to, ooh, that's a tongue twister. And then we will be back for the next step. First thing that I want to do next is just take a little light amount of some watered down Payne's Gray and do a sketch line of the top of a sand dune here. And I'm going just about 2.5 inches or so from the top. I'm just doing a curved line, just with some variegation. And next up, I'm gonna take some more Payne's Gray, and I wanna do the silhouette kind of background of some darker mountains that are way in the background here. So I am just gonna take my size 2 brush, kind of sketch some more, less rounded curves, but more textured and angular, like traditional mountain curves. So I've got some almost just rough, like triangle-like movements here with this darker mountain area. And then from here, I'm going to take my size 6 brush and just fill that area in with a little bit more of a darker tone of Payne's Gray. Before the mountain fully dries, I'm just going to rinse off my brush and dab it on my paper towel. And just using a clean dry brush, I'm going to lift some of the paint just slightly, just to give a few pops of highlights on the mountain, so that way it's not just one solid shade of blue. And I'm just applying pressure with my brush, and that's just going to help lift some of that paint. So for the base of our sand dune color, I mixed some VanDyke Brown, Payne's Gray, and Yellow Ochre, and I added a lot of water to that color. And it was mostly Yellow Ochre with a touch of Payne's Gray and a good solid brushful of VanDyke Brown. And then I got this nice kind of wash color. And if as you're mixing your colors too dark, like mine's were previously when I was trying to figure out this color, this had more VanDyke Brown, but I added a couple more brushfuls of the Yellow Ochre just to kind of counteract and balance it out. And then I ended up with this color. To start out, I am going to paint the silhouette of one of our sand dunes. And I'm simply just doing this kind of wavy curve. From here, I'm going to take my brush and just fill it with some more, or just dab it into the jar to get some more water. And I'm going to be pulling from this line that I painted to kind of get that nice warm tone of our sand dune color. And I'm filling that all the way to the top. And then from here, to help kind of shade the sand dune, I'm going to take a touch of Payne's Gray. And I want to just shade some of this with just a little bit of this Payne's Gray color, very watered down. And while it's still wet, I'm going to take a clean, damp size 6 brush and just help kind of buff out that color. Again, I'm using mostly water, but just a touch of that Payne's Gray to add in that shading color. And that's just going to give the sand dunes a little bit more dimension and depth. From here, I'm just going to continue with my size 6 brush, and I'm going to take just a little bit of watered down Payne's Gray to sketch out our remaining sand dunes. So first, I'm going to start like about almost midway to the left side of this page here, and I'm going to do an angled line that kind of swoops up towards the right. Then from here towards the left, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of do another curved line that connects just a little bit over halfway of the painting. And then from here, I want to paint a little bit more of a close-up sand dune. And so I'm going to now kind of do a swooping curved line just like so, and then have it form a little bit of a hill. And then from here, I'm going to then add a little bit of a kind of circular kind of brush stroke here. And it's just going to swoop slightly underneath this curve. And then kind of angled downward. It's a little bit too light. I'll add a little bit more pigment to that sketch. And then I'll just angle that sketch line towards the left corner of my paper. And from here, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of do the similar technique that we did previously with this first layer of the sand dunes. And I'm gonna do it in this layer, the smaller one off towards the left, and this one here. And once I get those completed, I will then focus on this more detailed sand dune that's towards the bottom. In between painting each layer, I will let that layer dry and set so that way I don't have any of the colors or layers bleeding into each other. And again, I'm just carrying on with that beige blend of the VanDyke Brown, Payne's Gray, Yellow, Ochre, and then adding in that Payne's Gray towards the bottom to shade each layer. Now that I'm at this final sand dune down below, I am just going to fill that in with a nice wash of our mixed beige color here. And then I'm going to mix some Payne's gray with a little bit more of our beige color. And I'm just gonna fill in this shaded area with a combination of both the blue and that beige. And I'm going to fill in this shaded area of the sand dune. And I'm following kind of this loop kind of formation here. And from here, I'm just taking a clean, damp brush, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of a highlight up towards the top here. I'm just lifting some of that pigment with pressure with my brush. And while that area is still damp, I'm just gonna take a little bit of Payne's gray and just add a little bit more shading towards the upper area of this loop. And then I'm gonna take a clean brush and just kind of buff that out and just smooth it out a little bit. All right, and off towards this bottom right corner, I'm gonna add a little bit of a kind of shaded element here using some more of our beige color just to layer on just a little bit of a shadow. All right, now I'm gonna let this area set and then I'm gonna add just a little bit of greenery. All right, next up, using my size 2 brush, I'm gonna mix a little bit of Sap Green with a little bit of Prussian Blue, just to tone down that green a little bit. And I am going to add a yucca plant. So I'm just gonna use really delicate light pressure with the tip of my brush. And in kind of a fanning motion, I'm going to paint just a few layered, kind of almost like porcupine spikes off towards this left side. And once I have that laid out, I'm going to take a little bit of yellow ochre, and I'm going to do a curved, almost like rainbow curved line, kind of pointed towards the left side of the page. And then from here, I'm going to continue with my yellow ochre and add just a little bit of texture to the tip of this curve here. From there, I'm just going to take a little touch of VanDyke Brown, and I'm going to shade one side of the stem using that color just to give it a little bit more dimension. And I'll add just a few touches of that remaining VanDyke Brown to shade these details in that kind of floral area. Alrighty, and now I want to add just a few more kind of pops of foliage here. I'm going to do maybe one more kind of smaller yucca plant off towards the left here. So again, I'm carrying on with that kind of porcupine, kind of spiky texture using light pressure with the tip of my brush. And then carrying on with that yellow ochre. Maybe this yucca plant is a little bit smaller and it's pointed towards the opposite direction. And again, I'm just carrying on with the yellow ochre here. Just adding some texture there. And then I'm gonna grab a little bit of VanDyke Brown and just shade some of that stem. Okay. Next, I want to take just a touch of Payne's Gray, and I just want to give a little bit of shading to the greenery here, just by adding a few touches of a deeper kind of Payne's Gray green blend. That's just going to give it a little bit more depth. Okay, and next up I want to add, using some Payne's Gray, kind of some watered down Payne's Gray here. I am then gonna grab a little bit of that color and kind of reverse some of these spikes here by adding some shading. So I just want to add enough Payne's Gray here to where we can see a shadow casting below the yucca plant. So just at a slight left angle below this yucca plant, I'm doing some kind of like reverse spikes here. And then from here, I'm gonna do a curved, like cast shadow using the same Payne's Gray. And I'm veering that off towards the left. And then I'm adding a few textures towards the end to mimic that foliage of the yucca plant. So there's our cast shadow. And then I will mimic that just towards the bottom here of this other yucca plant. It's pretty much cut off, but just adding a little bit of a touch of that shading down below with the Payne's Gray. Okay, and then from here, I want to add just a little bit of some more foliage using some of our yellow ochre, brain fog, our yellow ochre and a little bit of VanDyke Brown. I'm simply just going to be adding just a little bit of texture and foliage using these colors here. And I'm just doing almost like a grass-like texture, starting with this area towards the right. And then up towards the top here, I'll do kind of some spikes with this yellow ochre as well. Maybe just a few smaller areas. Okay, and then from here, I am just going to be adding a little bit of VanDyke Brown to shade some of these areas. And then I'm gonna take our Payne's gray, just watered down, and I'm just gonna do a little bit of a shadow underneath these areas here, and just slightly dragging it out towards the left. And that is it. I hope you enjoyed this watercolor landscape tutorial of White Sands National Park in New Mexico. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any further landscape watercolor tutorials.